22nd, 2021's press conference, teach-in for the Black Brilliance Research Project. We're so close to done. You can feel the excitement exuding from my face. Hello, everyone. I'm Shaun Glaze. I use they, them pronouns. I'm one of the co-leads for the Black Brilliance Research Project. And I'm here with some of our all-star team of community researchers. I'm going to kick us off with a barking dog and a land acknowledgement. And you know what? If my dog keeps barking, I'll have to hand this off to LéTania, which is what's going to happen. LéTania, if you can kick us off with a welcome and land acknowledgement, that'd be great. Thanks.
I don't have the land acknowledgement language, but welcome everyone. If you drop it in the chat, Shaun, I can take care of it.
I think I got it. My dog stopped. We'll do it before the dog comes back. All right. We are here on the lands of the Coast Salish people, the ancestral lands, the present lands of the Coast Salish people, especially the Duwamish tribe. We are here to, in part, say thank you so much, and to recognize not only that we're on the lands of our Coast Salish siblings, but also that there's something that we can do to materially benefit, support our fellow folks on this world, and that is to check out realrentduwamish.com. If you're here in the Seattle area, if you're here in King County area, this is a concrete way that you can help support our siblings and also just, you know, really acknowledge, not just with words, but with action. With that said, that's our land acknowledgement. My dog stopped barking. My kid put my dog in like a closet or something, so I think we're good. Okay, that's even better. We're going to do a screen share. We're going to go through a presentation. So that's exciting. The Black Brilliance Research Project, what is that? If you have somehow managed to like go this long without hearing about what the Black Brilliance Research Project is, I'll give you a quick little catch you up. Go ahead, I can see your screen. You can go ahead and put in present mode, we're good. I'll give you a quick little update. Basically, last year in the summer of 2020, there you go. You can go to the next slide even. The summer of 2020, there were mass protests built on decades of organizing to make a change to say, hey, time's up. We need to really do something and defend Black lives, support Black folks, and do something to create a world where everyone can thrive. So people protested, marched every single day, and really demanded that our local governments do something different. Here in Seattle, that something different included following community's lead. Community members came together and created a blueprint for what it could look like to divest from policing systems and reinvest money into community. And part of how we built that roadmap included a community-based research project, a participatory action research project, or just, you know, a research project where community members, everyday community members came together and asked 3 key questions. What creates true community safety? What creates true community health? And what do we need to thrive? That research project is ended up becoming the world's largest Black and Brown community-led research in the world. That happened during a pandemic here in Seattle. And you'll hear from some of the researchers that have been participating in that project as part of this presentation. Why do we do research? Not just to ask questions, to get really good answers from our fellow community members, but also to use those answers to create the roadmap for what investments should look like in our local government. So instead of just saying, hey, 9 or 10 people, you know, whether that's city council or the mayor, you know, make the decisions for how investments should happen. We're like, we've been doing that for a long time. Let's instead let community lead the way. So we came together, collected a lot of data, and then put together this roadmap for what participatory budgeting is going to look like for the city of Seattle, and also to inform the King County process. Super proud, historic, really exciting. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and advance to the next slide, which will talk about our research findings. So here today we have 2 researchers who will be presenting on some of the findings. You will remember them very likely because they've been presenting weekly on what they've been learning, what they've been hearing, what community has been telling us needs to happen for these investments. Thanks for making that bigger. So it looks a little weird to me. All right, so first we have LéTania Horace from the Silent Task Force. Thank you, LéTania. If you can please take it away. Don't be shy. Let us know what's up.
Hello, community. Hello, everybody. I'm LéTania, and I'm the project manager for the Silent Task Force Bomb Family Outreach Research Project. And we are so excited to be at this particular point and phase of the research where we are finally finishing up, wrapping up the bits and pieces to put these reports together. And it is a big, huge task. Being able to do research on your own community. I've been in Seattle for some time, have many historic ties to the community from family and ancestors and things of that nature. And one of the things that I know from, working in health and human services and the needs of our community over these past 20 some odd years is that, folks will come into our community, they will have focus groups, they will ask us what they want to know about our communities, and they'll take that information, go back and package it up and come out with a plan that does not include Black folks doing the work for their own community. And every time I've mentioned this throughout the years, folks be looking at me sideways like, why do you need to do that? Because poverty pimping is real. And our community basically can do the work that it needs to have done for itself. So some of the findings that we had, particularly around safety, we asked several questions around safety. And one of the things that our community came back with, and this is through the data, we learned that community safety and family safety go hand in hand. And sometimes the danger is inside the home as well as out. Domestic violence in the Black community is a generational, systemic communal issue that has impacted our youth and families for many years. And based on our data and one-on-one conversations with our communities, safety is paramount, but it's sometimes unattainable. And when we have no other choice but to contact police instead of having our own crisis response, there are many reasons why we do not contact the police, particularly when there are disputes or aggressive situations due to the response and the over-policing that we experience and the potential of life-threatening violence from the system we call to protect us. And one of the anecdotes from one of the folks that we have many anecdotes, folks had a lot to say about it. But one thing I will say is that, you talk, research, we're doing research. It's not easy asking Black folks about their personal thoughts about issues that concern them, because so many times in the past, they've been interviewed or surveyed, and this information is in turn used against them. So we take our community's confidentiality sincerely. Like, you're not gonna know who we talk to because that's not your business, because we hold their thoughts and their responses sacred as we told them we would. And so one of the comments was a very clear, line in terms of what, calling the police looks like. And we have many examples of that, but it just was so thought provoking. This person was saying that, hey, there was a person outside, and this person was really, escalating in really violent type behavior. I didn't want to call the police because we know what can happen when you call the police, but someone in our community did call the police, and the police came and they responded very respectfully. However, I have to wonder if, because this person was a white person, is that why they responded in that way? And I was like thought provoking, but not even really thought provoking, because I think I know the answer to that. And I think anybody else listening probably does as well. And some of the other, just to be really quick but brief, when we asked our community about health and wellness, in the community health portion of our survey, we focused on access and quality of healthcare, and if participants needed help accessing healthcare and accessing culturally specific healthcare, healing services, and issues to do with food insecurity and access to nutritious food. We also focused on our elders and persons with disabilities. Folks, our community serve in the military, and we really don't talk much about it like it's not something that happens, but there are a lot of our communities that do serve in the military, and a lot of our veterans are out here without any health care and not able to access it from the VA. So there's a whole lot that we can say around healthcare, but we know that some of this, some of the disparities is due to miseducation, homelessness, displacement, and not knowing how to access these resources. And also, like 36.9% of our participants didn't have access to culturally specific mental health counseling, substance abuse treatment, and non-traditional holistic healing services that our community provides for itself. And the distrust in the medical systems in this country are rooted in systemic racism that has been experienced not just recently, but for centuries in this country. And so, you know, this past week, I know that King County Equity Now did they had a teach-in or a meeting or a presentation where they had the Black doctor that he was a lead physician at Carolyn Downs, and it was all over the news. You know, this brother was like, there's you know, allegations of racisms and things of that nature that he was experiencing. He had to step down, you know. But if we look at Carolyn Downs and Odessa Brown's, you know, that clinic was created by some of the original organizers in Seattle, the Black Panthers, and Carolyn Downs herself. So, you know, we have a lot of history there, but now, you know, many Black people don't even go there because it's a different environment. I was talking to one of my elders today, and she was like, you know, I used to go there, but it's a total different environment. I don't go anymore because, you know, they don't care about us. They're not concerned with Black folks coming to our historic clinic that was put here, you know, in our community for us, because the community has been displaced as well. So I can go on and on and on. I'm gonna back up, and I'm gonna let my girl Ahkia come to the platform and talk about some of her findings. I just want to say we're really thankful and very grateful to have been a part of this. And I want to thank all the community people that have participated in this project. It's not easy getting this information from our community, but more importantly, we have to be stewards of that, and we have to guard that information, but make sure that the data itself gets out so that folks know what our community needs, what it wants, and what it don't need no more of, because folks will tell you if you ask them. But also, it also requires relationships with the community. And so I appreciate my team. They all have deep roots in all over the county. And I mean, we were countywide, just know this, because so many of our brothers and sisters no longer live in Seattle, and not because they don't want to, but they've been gentrified out of the community. And that's a real issue. It's reality. And we need to not forget them because they are no longer in the city. We need to remember them and know that many of them are living in resource deserts, food deserts, and they need the same resources that we all deserve. And with that, I'm gonna end. Thank you.
I love it. Yes, that was really well done, as always. I think that one of the really beautiful things about this work is getting to work with people who work across the county, who have relationships across the county, who are connected and touching just different parts of community that are typically, you know, not thought about as being the first group of people to be at the decision-making table. It was actually really important to the quality and the integrity of the work that we are really focusing forever and ever and ever on really thinking about who's at the table and who's not, who's left behind, who hasn't had a chance yet, and how do we make sure we're creating a world where people can help to create the kinds of outcomes they need to see to be healthy, safe, and thrive. And with that said, I will pass it to Ahkia. Ahkia, go ahead.
Hello, all peoples. I'm Ahkia. I'm with Sacred Community Connections. We just love people. We provide services, support groups, healing, all that good stuff. And we were very happy to be a part of the Black Brilliance Research Project. It's been so much fun. We've really met some just absolutely, I don't know how to say it, life-changing relationships have been built. So I'm super excited. We were able to touch on multiple points at this, but we focused on specifically the housing and physical spaces, which is very important to the communities that we serve. If you don't know who we serve folks who are living without homes, folks who inject and are dependent on substances, folks who are in the sex trade and street economy, and specifically Black, queer, and trans folks. As throughout King County and Seattle, we tend to get spaced out and we tend to not know each other. And if we do, it's like, because we know each other. So as we think through what it looks like to hold physical space for these communities, we're talking about real risk being extremely magnified because these folks just can't access physical spaces. I mean, housing is a big issue for us all, but to exist chronically houseless, to exist in survival sex work, to exist in a space where you can't find somewhere to use a substance that helps you continue to be well and function and show up the way everybody else gets to show up. And Black and queer folks just don't get any space. So as you think through what it means to provide space, to really allot folks a place of their own, somewhere that they can feel grounded, somewhere that they can bring friends and loved ones and pop a date, honestly. You know, use what they gotta do. I think that we need to start considering these nuanced needs that folks don't think about. We need safe using spaces. We can't afford to keep losing our folks to overdoses. It's not enough to just know where the bad dope is. We have to be able to actually put Narcan in our systems, in our systems of knowing each other, and in people's hands, put the training in people's hands, and really give them, you know, a space to feel whole, even if we can't give them housing right now. One of the hardest things being homeless is still having all of your belongings. And as we think through taking up space, we don't think about the fact that a lot of times folks in these predicaments, ding dong, folks are usually carrying their homes with them, and they take up a lot of space. And typically they're outed because of the space they take up. Typically that's a way in which people have been able to discriminate and push folks out of because they take too much space up. But what if we had storage units that didn't cost much or cost very little that folks could use? Hey, Chris, what if we provided more spaces in, you know, closed down buildings for folks to store their things? I mean, there's so much space. There's just so much space for so little to be given to these communities. So as we think through housing needs and space needs, I would love to continue to invite us to think about the folks and more than just the housing, because that's not always enough either. Another thing that we were able to hear from community, and a lot of community at that, is about our wellness and how we're taking care of each other and how folks are healing and how folks have been dealing and surviving and coping. And how a lot of times we move through these experiences, and that's the goal, right? Like a lot of us, we want folks to get out of situations that no longer serve them or situations they never should have been in the first place. Like some folks just don't need to be in proximities to certain things. And we're trying to help them move through that, and we're trying to help them come into different changes, but who's actually helping them? I'm not sure if anybody knows, but change management is a huge thing for businesses. Businesses actually pay somebody to help them manage their changes. They like, there's conferences and everything about it, y'all. Look it up. But what if we were to really provide those same type of skills in a wellness aspect to folks who are coming out of houselessness, folks who are changing their lifestyle around dependencies to substances, folks who are stopping the sex trade? Because I'm gonna tell you, it's hard to stop being a hoe. Like, I am not gonna stop. So some of us just don't. But what if you do want to? Like, how are you moving through that? What does wellness look like for an ex-stripper? What does wellness look like for someone who looks at little containers and only sees places to hide drugs? Like, how do you perform wellness and give yourself care? And who's talking about that? Like, no one's talking about the fact that, like, a lot of my friends I know, after they get done with moving through the systems to regain a stable housing environment, that we hoard. I have so much food, and I'm blessed because, you know, we have the SEC and we have partners that can make sure this food gets used. But like, we have a lot of tendencies that come from the instabilities, and a lot of practices that you learn in survival that you take into other parts of your life that you just maybe don't need anymore. It's really hard to survive and thrive at the same time. So thinking about wellness and how we're supporting folks mentally, spiritually, community-wise, how are we allowing folks to walk through these changes, you know, with the grief? Because there's a grief. There's so much that you lose when you lose these things that have defined you, when you're done being a sex worker, when you're no longer a stripper, when you're no longer that homeless person. And who the fuck are you? And really helping folks reconnect with themselves and really think about like, dream again, you know, like, how beautiful to dream again, and really incorporate dreaming into wellness. And we heard that from community. Community is excited to get done with this pandemic and hug each other again. Community is excited to stop hitting elbows with each other. We're excited to start embracing our friends and our family. And how do we recreate, really, dismantle and recreate these systems that have failed us? And how do we consistently think about the things that we just haven't thought about before? Maybe we have thought about, but maybe we just didn't have space to make. But now we can make that space, and community is so freaking pumped. Everyone I've spoken to is so excited that their storytelling became a part of a 1,400-page research thing. And I'm telling folks like, hey, like y'all are like researchers, like we were doing research. This is research, did you know? And people are like, just like, what? How amazing is it that we can just sit in space and love each other and produce such beautiful outcomes? So needless to say, I'm excited, but when am I not? And I'm so happy to be here. My camera went away because I'm so excited, but I'm so happy to be here. So prepared and ready for PB and all of the things that come with it. And we're looking forward to building more connections and getting back to loving on each other as soon as possible. So I'm not sure who's next, but it's gonna be great.
Thanks, Kia. I'm next. I always love hearing you speak. It has been one of the highlights of my week, every single week, whether it's in teach-ins, whether it's in our twice a week public office hours, our check-ins, our like hangout sessions, our late night, what the hell's going on when we're texting. It's just always good to talk to you. And I love how you like segued so seamlessly into PB there by talking about the research and how it informs this idea of like what happens next, because too often researchers like exist. We come into a community. I'm going to say we for a little bit, even though that's not how I like to do research, but come into a community and we're just like, here's what's up. We roll up our sleeves. We get our little clipboards. We got our little focus group moderator guides that we wrote. We get our little recorders and we just collect data. And then we're like, here are your answers. But this process has been very different from that. It's been a lot more collaborative, a lot more democratic, and a lot more exciting because it's going to turn into real dollars into our community. And so if you're joining us with this slide, and if you're coming a little bit later, welcome to the Black Brilliance Research Project's teach-in / press conference. We are taking questions from Facebook and YouTube and all of those sources, and email as well for our press team. And here we are, PB, the main event. All right, y'all, we talked about the research. A lot of you are like, I already knew those things. If you're part of community, you probably could have already told us what the top 5 priorities were. You already knew it was housing and physical space, mental health, economic development, youth, children, and really thinking about families, and then also thinking about crisis and wellness. You're like, yep, those are my priorities. And I say that because we saw that same thing across racial groups as we conducted our research, is that everyone kind of knew where the investments needed to be to some extent and had different ideas on how to actually make those investments real, like where specifically in housing and specifically in crisis. So right now I'm going to transition us to the next part, which is PB, which is the how. So we have this money, at least $30 million from the city, that's going to go through participatory budgeting, PB, participatory budgeting. And all that is this democratic way to say, hey, we the people should get to decide how our money is spent. Like that is just what it should look like. We the people should have real power over real money, and so that we can help people, help our community be safer, be healthier, to thrive. And PB is the mechanism that we are using to do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about what PB looks like in Seattle, and then I'll invite our guest from the Participatory Budgeting Project to talk about what PB looks like as well, and what her reflection is on this process as someone who has seen several different PB projects across. PB is a global thing, so that people can hear from that. So here's how it's going to work in Seattle. So in Seattle, we've been doing PB for a while, just for a few years now. So this isn't super new to us. We have an annual process where we engage community and say, hey, how do you want to spend some of this money? And typically we've used it for parks and streets, which has been really cool. But this year, we're going to use it according to the findings of this research that we've just been talking about. And so right now we're in the design phase. Community designs the PB process. This roadmap that we keep talking about, right? Roadmap from all those research findings, all of that goes into the design of PB. Outreach starts. So y'all might have seen people have already started to do teach-ins. They've started to do train the trainers. They're going out to their churches. They're going out to their neighborhood groups, hanging out with their parents. They're just like, hey, have you heard about this PB thing? And people are like, what's that? And it's like a whole thing that is happening. You are participating in that by watching this and saying, I have no idea that this is going on, but now I'm excited. So that's you. You're part of the outreach. And the steering committee selection process is also going to be kicking off very soon. Next, after that, it's just like we've done before at Seattle. Community is going to come together and brainstorm ideas and how figure out, how we want to use those funds. Again, what's different this year is that once we move from brainstorming ideas to developing proposals, those ideas that are going to get funded, that'll get turned into real projects that we can vote on, have to be aligned with what community has said the priorities are. So we want to make sure that those 5 buckets are reflected in the ideas that people are moving forward, because community said that's where the investments need to be. So we'll develop proposals, we'll figure out what some details. This person said this idea, the second person said the same idea, we'll combine them so we're not voting on I don't want to say a million, but so that we're voting on a smaller list of proposals. And then we vote. So we've done this in Seattle before, where like a whole month people were just saying what their ideas were and voting on the ones that they really liked. And then the winning projects win. So that's our PB process, and it's annual. So it starts all over again, like again and again, to make sure that we are designing a process where, again, community gets to decide how to spend public funds. And this year is the first year that we've seen such a robust investment where we've divested from police and reinvested in community through a process that is Black-led, that has Black folks really talking to each other, has Black and brown people talking to each other to decide what those priorities are, and then putting forth those investment buckets, and then designing out the process. That'll now be the new Seattle PB, the new Seattle PB way. So with that said, I'll pass it over to Kristania. I would love to hear your reflections as someone who's seen so many PB processes. Like, what do you think about Seattle?
Thank you so much, Shaun, and thank you everyone for having me. Hi, I'm Kristania De Leon, and with the Participatory Budgeting Project. And what we do is support folks in adopting participatory budgeting processes all over the US and Canada. We were founded as a nonprofit alongside the first ever PB process in the United States, which took place in Chicago, and have worked to grow and support and sustain the adoption of participatory budgeting ever since. It is a process that we believe in. It is something that we absolutely constantly research and are supporting evaluation and growing and learning around all the time. And we've been really excited to see the approach and some of the work that's been happening in Seattle. I think part of it that's really important when we think about participatory budgeting is putting it in the right context. And part of that understands a couple of things. One, that participatory budgeting is really intended to be a process that shifts power, that really does shift systems and really thinks about, how we think about decision making that is more inclusive and more community driven, more community led. And to that end, we always understand at the Participatory Budgeting Project that participatory budgeting is a framework. You can do PB all kinds of ways. You can do PB ways that are very intentional and they're very mindful about community-led decision making. And you could probably do PB and run through the phases of a framework and yield outcomes that can be really harmful, actually, and really painful for community members. And what we always seek to do when we partner with folks or when we offer reflections around the work that's being done is not just around, is it happening and is it, the phases being, kind of seen through, but also is it being done in a way that is intentionally accessible, equitable, and significant? Will it actually yield some kind of benefit that supports community leadership in a way that matters, that is worth the time and effort, that is worth sort of the commitments to equity and justice, that they're manifesting in a way that actually matters. So we've been really heartened by the evolution of PB in Seattle and a lot of the framework that's been put forward here and throughout this process to really start PB and kick it off. And when we look at the influence of the participatory research that's been done and what that really means. It's really, I will say, a pretty unique process in Seattle to really start before you design the process and before you pilot something at this scale and with these kinds of objectives, with a significant investment in community voice and identifying the specific areas where they want to see investments made as we divest from systems and that feel like they're harmful, and that people are saying we can do better than this. Let's take these resources, let's look at the needs in our community, and let's think about, you know, what equitable investments actually look like in a way that's led by community members that are most impacted and who we made commitments to honoring in this work. And so to see Black-led research really at the start of, you know, grounding this work in a commitment to honor those needs in the outcomes of the process is something that I think is absolutely incredible to see. And I think will be sort of a pathway forward for other folks that want to do PB and learn from Seattle and watch Seattle, because this is kind of the dream, right? How do we get all the work that builds to the process to be as inclusive and as transparent as the outcomes of the process as well? And also thinking about, you know, it's beautiful to understand that people in Seattle are learning about this participatory budgeting process, not just from the advocates that have been pushing for it for so long, but from their neighbors, from each other. Shaun, what you just alluded to, right? Folks really teaching each other about what it is and how it works, and the ability for that community cohesion to really speak to the power and promise of PB, not just any PB, right? But PB that is equitable and PB that is not just kind of operating in a way that kind of is neutral or passive, but very actively centered around community voice and community need is absolutely incredible to see. We're really grateful and inspired by what's happening. We feel like we've been able to work in partnership to an extent to get us here, but really are constantly learning from the advocacy and the approach that's being done in Seattle for this process in particular, and the intentional ways in which the groundwork that's been laid with this research is going to really inform and then bear out a process that is deeply community-led and community-centered. And those are the kind of strategic sort of pieces of success that we always look to in other PB processes when we think about, you know, does this matter and is it really equitable? Is it going to really deliver what people want? So we're really excited, and I think what this work kind of lays the groundwork for is also the robust community engagement, the robust transparency, and the robust like community ownership that is really essential to good PB. So really excited to see sort of this vision coming to life, leveraging the incredible expertise of community that's been manifested in this research so far and will continue to manifest throughout the process, and just really excited to look at, you know, how we understand data differently and how we can really honor community lived experience, community voice as really important information in the work that we do, how we make policy decisions, how we make budget decisions. And I'm happy to answer any other questions about participatory budgeting that people might have as we continue to kind of grow and learn together. Really excited. Thanks for having us.
Wow, that was beautiful. Yes. That is absolutely right. We want a process that is equitable. We want a process that isn't just about like sprinkling some color onto something. This is like from jump all about really thinking about centering the experiences of those who are most harmed by police brutality, by the fact that we invest money currently, our status quo, and some of that money kills Black people. I'm just going to say it. Some of the money that we give the city kills Black people, and it also kills Indigenous people. Our Black and Indigenous people in particular are killed more or harmed more than the rest of our community, and that's not okay. And it's, you know, decades of organizing that have brought us to this point to even make this possible. And it is also people like waking up sometimes for the first time to that stark reality of like, hey, we could do something different. We could decide to listen to the people who've been harmed the most consistently for decades and say, hey, what might it look like if we created a process where y'all get to tell us, you know, what should happen next? What might that look like? What might that look like in terms of, you know, doing a research process, a community engagement process where we talk to y'all? It's like, well, okay, but what if we were the ones who were doing the talking? And what if we talked with each other first? And we just kind of asked our community, hey, what do you think? And people said, well, since you asked, let me tell you what it's really, you know, just like there's something really magic about thinking about who's in the driver's seat, who is, you know, making decisions. And then also, how do you design something that allows for those who have been farthest away from decision-making table You put them at the front. And with that said, that transitioned us to the very last part of design the process is steering committee, right? Steering committee. So the most common question by far, hands down, every single teach-in, presentation, email, like event where we talk about PB is like, okay, but who's gonna be in charge? What's the steering committee is about? Have y'all picked the steering committee? Literally the most common question. Have y'all picked the steering committee? And I'm like, look, we are not in charge of picking the steering committee. That's not how it's gonna work. We're in charge of asking community what they want this process to look like, and then developing something that actually achieves that outcome. And one of the things that people told us over and over again is they are so tired of the same old group of people being the ones who are like calling the shots. They're like, it's time to do something different. We want those who've been the most impacted by this criminal legal system to be in the seat for like deciding what happens. But we also know that we have issues in terms of figuring out, well, you can't just go with the loudest voices in the room. A lot of people who'd be really great in these positions, they don't recognize themselves as being experts. The only way to get them is to have a nomination process. And so we talked to people about that nomination process and what that could look like. And then we heard that people were like, well, the real problem is the people who evaluate the applications don't have the lived experience. And so they don't know what to look for. They don't know what questions to ask. There's all kinds of nuance to people's answers that you'll miss if you're not part of that community. All right, then. So what you're telling me is we need a two-step process. We need a process to pick the people who are going to evaluate the application to the steering committee, and we need a steering committee. So here's what's going to happen. According to the roadmap that was built after talking to thousands of community members, the city and communities will share job descriptions for the steering committee. And they're going to post them. They're going to post them everywhere. Community is going to be sending them in emails and newsletters and at events, and like city is going to be like on all their websites. You know, just basically it's going to be broadly shared. And then, just like jury duty, those who are highly qualified on this the scoring, you know, assessment for the whose would be a great fit for this job, those who are highly qualified will be randomly selected, a small group of them, to become a jury, a community jury. They are the ones who also have just as much lived experience as the people who could serve on the steering committee itself. We'll show those criteria on the next slide, but just letting you know how this is going to work. So you have highly qualified people, randomly selected. That's your jury. They're looking through all the other applications saying, this one, this one, this one, right? And picking the rest of the people. And then the people they pick will be the steering committee. So we go on our next slide. Here are the criteria. These are the criteria community says needs to be reflected on the steering committee. These are them. I will read them because I don't expect anyone to just like read the slides. The first one, people who have been incarcerated. Again, like this is all happening because we know that we are looking for a strategy in our communities where we stop spending so much money on killing and harming Black people, on killing and harming people who are marginalized in our community. We want something different. And we know that the criminal legal system has been a strategy that we've used before, and it has not worked the way that we want it to. I'll say it that way. And so people who have been incarcerated have lived experience with every single step of that criminal legal system. So we want to make sure that they're on the steering committee. We also want to make sure that there are people who are well connected to multiple community organizations because they have relationships in different places. People with lived experience of homelessness, again, another population where like we want to make sure that people who are closest to the issues, those same people are closest to the solutions, they should be on that steering committee. We also want to make sure we have people with disabilities. And so people with disabilities are often, it's like a term that people just kind of throw out there, but there are unique experiences, especially attached to disability and disability justice. And it's really important that we make sure that our steering committee reflects that. People who are trans, non-binary, or gender non-conforming. This came up quite a few times in conversations with community as being one of the community members or community experiences that we want to make sure is reflected, typically not reflected in decision-making roles. Black women, I love Black women. I'm just gonna say it, I love Black women. And Black women are one over and over and over again. Before, in an earlier version, when we asked community, who do you want to see reflected, people said Black people in general. And then when we would ask them more details about what they wanted that to look like, they're like, well, specifically Black women, because Black women make sure everyone gets fed. Like Black women are doing the most for everybody, and we want to make sure that our steering committee is going to reflect that experience. Older adults, our elders. Now, elders, I know some of you might not identify as elders, so we put older adults to make sure that you too can see yourself here. But we want to make sure that we have people that's an intergenerational steering committee, that it's not just, you know, all one generation, because we really do believe that there's something really beautiful, powerful, and necessary about having the experiences of multiple generations reflected on a decision-making body like this. That said, youth, at least 2. Why do we have at least 2 for this? Because we heard over and over again, you put one youth on like a committee of like a bunch of other people who aren't youth, that one youth gets drowned out. So making sure there's at least 2 of them so that the steering committee can reflect youth voice. And then people from the African diaspora, again, these are folks overrepresented in terms of the criminal legal system and also in terms of other negative outcomes related to our government investments. A person appointed by the Duwamish Tribal Services. So we talked to several folks from the Duwamish tribe, several indigenous communities about what makes sense and what is a good way to reflect the spirit of the community, and also to people who aren't indigenous to find out like the best way to make sure that the fact that Black people and indigenous people are often like at the very top of people who are harmed by policing, harmed by criminal legal system are reflected. This is the language that we were told by community. And then lastly, people from communities overrepresented in negative health outcomes, because again, we're thinking about safety and health. So the more of these criteria that you have, the higher your scores would be on in terms of the steering committee. We want to see those experiences reflected. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, but guess what? The steering committee isn't alone. So we have a whole community around them. So the steering committee, yeah, they're making like the rules and stuff, but they're not all by themselves. They have an outreach work group who's making cool slides and hip hop music and light projections and pottery and coloring books and, you know, all of those things to educate community about PB, get them excited and let them know what's next. We have an accountability work group because guess what? Conflict's going to happen. We don't always get along all the time. There's always going to be something that's going to come up. And we want to make sure that there's a whole work group that's just looking for, responding to feedback about decision making, bringing appropriate parties together for any mediation that needs to happen, any healing circles, any, oh my gosh, can you believe a whole group of people who will help support that. And that'll also be important because let's be real, all of our community organizations, we don't always be on the same page about what needs to happen next. We could be in the same community and find out we have different ideas because we're different humans. And so having an accountability work group is super important, crucial for community to feel like this is a well-stewarded process. The last 3 groups I'll talk about a little bit, and then we'll move to the next slide. One is the lived experience work group. So that one is a variety of different lived experiences people want to see reflected. We've heard everything from an Asian American group. I do want to recognize that recently, because of COVID especially, our Asian American and Asian elders are being targeted by violence. And so being able to recognize that while having lived experience work group feels like important and crucial to name and recognize. And there's several other lived experiences that people also talked about as part of the research. The budget delegates and process facilitators. So these are the people. Okay, how many of you in the audience really love organizing? Like, I mean, like literally like putting things in boxes, being like, this is the same shade of color as this color. Are you that person? Did you love school supplies in school? Are you one of those folks? You would probably love being a budget delegate or process facilitator because you're like, I just want things to be organized and neat and to know what's happening next. And for someone like me who like grew up with like a lot of anxiety, I love you. I want you to continue to exist, and budget delegates and process facilitators, that might be the place for you. And then the restorative and proactive safety work group. This all started thinking about community safety and healing. This work group is connected to that on the ground work. So people who do this work, as volunteers or for pay, like day in and day out, this is your space to be like restorative and proactive safety, thinking about like, okay, what does it actually take to create true community safety and health? I know because I have a program that does it, or I know because me and like, I don't know, 5 other volunteers in our neighborhood go around and check on people and make sure they have food and get fed. So that is what that is. I'll go to the next slide. LéTania and Severe, I am remembering you and I were sharing these slides. I would love for you to have a chance to speak if you would like to.
I was like, sweet, Shaun's gonna take my slides. We all good. All right, I'll talk about our timeline. So yeah, we're hoping to kick this thing off real soon. You see March 7th on there. March starts next Monday, y'all. So we are close. We want to, get the applications out for the steering committee real soon so that folks can start to apply, and that process can get kicked off. Even before the steering committee is selected and going through their onboarding process, we can start the idea collection phase of PB. So I'm sure folks in the chats, on the comments, on the different media platforms watching this teaching right now have ideas. Write those things down. And then when it's time to put them up onto the website, you can put them in there and start adding ideas in just like 2 weeks. After that, we'll do that through April, kind of late April. And through that, we'll start the project development process of PB, which is where those ideas become like actual projects. We'll have folks to be able to scope those out and help community to understand like what it takes to get that idea to become an actual thing. Those are our, I think we'll have a lot of help from our city collaborators here, taking the lead from community and writing those up. Once that's written up, we'll also move into voting. So once we have projects posted, we'll be able to have the opportunity for community to vote. And I'll just add a few things about this. So participation in the participatory budgeting process is for everyone. Youth as young as 10 years old are eligible to participate. Also, your immigration status does not matter. If you're here, you can participate. Your incarceration status doesn't matter. If this is your community, we're working on ways to make sure that folks who are incarcerated have an opportunity to participate in PB. Who better to understand like what is going to make the community safer and thrive than those who are still currently being impacted by the criminal legal system right now. And so the process will be as accessible as possible. We're working on offline opportunities for folks who don't have internet. We're also working on trying to address some digital equity issues around the area. And so just trying to make PB as accessible as possible. And the voting options will be both online and offline through July and August. And then funding and implementation. So once ideas are voted on and throughout this process, remember making sure that these ideas and projects fall within the 5 buckets that came out of the Black Brilliance research projects that the team spoke about earlier. Those projects will get funded and then an implementation process will happen. Concurrently with that, we'll be kicking off next year's PB process. This is like, we want this to be the new normal. We want folks to understand that these are our dollars. The city has in the past decided how to use these dollars. And a lot of times they've decided to give hundreds of millions of dollars to a very violent entity that is harming and killing our community and not actually preventing anything. Any harm. And so, and in most cases, making it worse. And so this is an opportunity for community to say, we're done with that. We know what's best for us. And this is a process that we can highlight that. And so in late 2021 through February, we'll start kicking off next year's process and figuring out, the steering committee, how the next steering committee will be hired and figuring out the priorities in the process, how it will be designed going forward. So that's kind of the timeline. Shaun, is there anything you want to add on that?
I think you did a great job. Yeah, that looks really good.
Cool. I made this timeline like last night, y'all. We had to update. I know. I'm just like looking at it. You want me to take this one? Let's see.
Yeah,
all right. So this is, I can't see the top. Is this our train that like how our next steps?
Yeah,
cool.
Different next steps the community can take.
Perfect. So this is super fun part of the process. So I know you see all of our faces talking about PB all the time, but there are a lot of folks in the community doing it right now. We've had some teach-ins, we've had some train-the-trainers. There are folks who have the information, who are out there sharing it with their community. And if you're out there and you want to know more and be able to do teach-ins in your community, in your language, in your culture, we have the information, we have a toolkit for you, and we can share that out. So right now, folks are sharing information with community through social media, writing, art, music, anything really. We have other folks who are focused on finding barriers. One of those main barriers is definitely going to be internet and internet access and adequate internet access. Folks will need childcare if they were going to participate on like a work group, or maybe transportation. There are different barriers that folks, different communities address. And so having people who are finding what those are now so that we can address them in the future is prior to actually putting everything in place is really important. Let me move this box. Training up. Yes. Attend Train the Trainer and start practicing your outreach with other community members. If you're interested in teaching people about PB, we are so excited to make sure you have what you need. Everyone needs to know about PB. That's the goal. Every single person in Seattle and the neighboring area, your family who maybe isn't even in Seattle anymore, everybody needs to know. So we need everybody who's interested and excited about that information to reach out, and we can get you the information that you can post online and share with your community. Learn to lead. Check out the work groups and the experiences that are centered in leading PB. So we had that in the previous slide. If you have lived experience, if you meet the criteria on the steering committee criteria, definitely reach out and find out what you need to do to make sure that you have an opportunity to be leading this process. And then share research from the Black Brilliance Research Project. Yes, we have an easy tree, which I'm sure we could get dropped into the comments. I'm not going to spell it out because I'll probably not spell it right. I'll let Shaun do that later. And but yeah, definitely share out the research. We're trying to make the report more accessible. We'll be presenting it on Friday to council, and then it'll become public record, and it'll give you an opportunity to kind of look it up. We've split up the research project into sections. So it's a little bit more manageable than the 1,045-page document, the preliminary report that you probably have seen in the past. I think this is the last slide.
It is the last slide.
Cool.
Well done.
I'm going to stop sharing
time for
screen.
A little bit of Q&A. Yep, that sounds good. So I guess we have a few minutes for questions. One question that seems to come up over and over again is like, who on the city side should support it, and like what's a city worker's role look like? And so we do have details in the report itself. I will say, generally speaking, there are 3 departments that are really like more trusted than the other departments. They include the Department of the Office of Planning and Community Development, y'all, let's try that again. The Office of Planning and Community Development, specifically the Equitable Development Initiative EDI team. They are more trusted, and within that, UBA's team in particular is well respected. We also UBA. And so we also have the Office of Civil Rights and the Office of Refugee and Immigrant Affairs are more trusted. We keep getting asked about Department of Neighborhoods, and sorry, no, like we have consistently heard that because this is a community-led process, Department of Neighborhoods is not where trust lies, but that Dawn as the Department of Neighborhoods, play a support role. And doing things like connecting community members with resources, like connecting the steering committee people with who in the city knows how to answer that question, things like that, which are huge because the steering committee will likely be people who don't have deep city worker experience. And so we want to make sure that they are well resourced and supported to do what they want to do, which is support community. We've also heard questions about, are these paid positions? Yes. We would expect that, just like any kind of strategic advisor position, where you're thinking about complex projects, where you're thinking about where investments should be, where you're thinking about community engagement, that should be compensated. What we heard over and over again from community is you would have people in these focus groups or decision-making spaces where community got paid through pizza or like a $25 gift card, and all the city people in the room were making like 45, 50 plus an hour. And there's something kind of fishy about that, right? And so really thinking about an equitable pay structure is a big part of the report. So definitely check that out for more details. But definitely Strategic Advisor 2 is what we call it here in the city of Seattle. It's the same skill set for the most part, except that we have people who have deep community experience and can actually find you, can like knock on your door and be like, I know you need to know about this process, and map out a whole community network analysis if you even wanted it, without needing to, go through a large, lengthy, time consuming process. So yes, absolutely paid positions. We also hear questions about what comes up a lot.
Do we have a steering committee already?
Oh man!
No. There's literally nobody on the steering committee. It doesn't exist. As we mentioned, there's a whole application process that has not started. No one is on the steering committee. We do not pick the steering committee. That's going to be a community jury. That is what we were talking about in one of the slides.
If you get called for a community jury duty, it means that you either applied for this position or community trusted you and said you should do it. Please don't ignore that community jury summons. Lean into that decision-making role.
We put it on some official paper.
I know, right? I think some artists on that, maybe designing that jury summons. That'd be great so people don't ignore it. But yeah, it's very, very important that community knows about this process and that community owns it. If you're someone who's like, man, I really want to get started, I really want to know more, I just am waiting for permission, no one needs to give you permission. Go forth and talk about PB. We are all done with this press conference in terms of our presentation part. But we are never all done when it comes to supporting community to know more about the research that informs PB, or to help people get connected to the resources they need. In the chat, or MB website, the easytree.me/Black Brilliance Research. That's easytree.me/Black Brilliance Research. Or you can now go to the much easier www.blackbrillianceresearch.com, and it redirects there. And so go there and you'll see that we have prepared many things for you, including whatever latest public version of the report exists, several videos, several surveys, lots of materials for you. And you will also see a link to the PB Media Kit, which is something that we developed in collaboration with community to make it even easier to talk about PB. They're Canva templates, which if you are not a graphic designer, like me, I'm not a graphic designer, but you want stuff to look decent or like pretty even, Canva can get you there. And so we've prepared a variety of templates for you. So you can change the colors, you can change the font, change the language, and it'll work for your community. You can take that, you can remix it, you can add music, you can add videos, you can add art, you can put it in your newsletter, whatever you want to do to make it actually work for you and your community. That said, I think we close out, y'all. Any final thoughts on our very final, I think, press conference ever as a team?
That was awesome.
And amazing.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate, I think as someone who sees PB launch all the time, I will say we are so excited about what you're all building in Seattle. It's not just building and building off of what's there, it's leading in a really original and beautiful way to see, and sort of helping us think about not only holding space for radical imagination, but really tangibly showing up for each other in a way that's really going to make a difference. So we're really inspired, and we hope that y'all really feel how incredibly beautiful it is what you're building. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. I'm not going to cry on camera. We are doing good, y'all. Thank you so much. Thank you to our communities that we are connected to for trusting us to steward this process. Thank you to our ancestors who fought and bled and died and lived and loved and cared for us. We would not be here without you. And thank you so much to the people of Seattle and the people of King County who are trusting the idea that those closest to the issues are closest to the solutions. That yes, indeed, we can let community lead the way, and that we can keep each other safe, and that's what we're gonna do. That said, bye y'all. Until next time.
Bye.